All right, in this video, we're going to learn how to style based on an ID applied to some element on our page. So in this case, I made a div and I gave it an ID of about section. Down here, I made a span and I gave it an ID of important stuff. So how do we style these elements that have IDs applied to them? If we come back over here to our CSS page, I have an H1 and H3 and a body specified. What I want to do here is use a hashtag which specifies, hey, I'm going to style an ID. Section of code that's marked with an ID. And the first ID I used was about section. So this is going to be the style for the about section. Okay. And then inside this about section, I can style some elements. So let's make color :red. Okay. Now I'm saying the text inside this section should be styled with red. Save that. I'm going to refresh it. If you remember, this div surrounded the H3 and the paragraph. But the red only got applied to the paragraph. And that's because the H3, which is more specific than this div, the H3 had dark blue applied to it. So it's overriding the red that gets applied to that whole section. Remember, when we talk about styles and which style wins, the style that's closest to the element. So this color dark blue got applied to H3, which is way more specific than this bigger about section. So let's get rid of this H3 style here. We don't really need that for right now for what we're doing. And now you can see that everything in the about section, this area that I specified to have an ID of about section, got that style of red. Let's change that color to, let's do navy, just so it's something different. Well, that doesn't look a whole lot different than anything else. So I can use an ID to style a particular section of code, and I can use IDs anywhere. But this is my about section. So I gave it an ID of about section. Fine. How about this ID of important stuff? Let's do that. Let's go over here and do a style for that. So my selector in this case will be important stuff. Let's set its color to red. Okay, so important stuff should be colored red, and it should also be, let's have a font weight bold. Okay, important stuff will be red and bold. So I put an ID on important stuff for red and bold, and there it is. This is this text that I put inside the span with an ID of important stuff automatically turned red and bold. Now IDs are great, but you can only use an ID once on a page. So if I wanted to make this text down here and I decided this is important and I want to put a span around it, so let me do that. Oops. I think I accidentally placed it. Get my span on here. And my slash span. Slash span up there. And I don't know how I accidentally put the paragraph in there. All right, so there's another span. But the thing is, I can't use ID of important stuff again. Okay, IDs can only be used once on a page. So up here, the about section, I'm not going to have another about section, so using an ID up here is okay. So we don't want to use IDs when we're going to have two sections of important stuff, or two spots of important stuff. Instead, we want to use a class. So I'm going to say this is class equals important stuff. And down here, the span class important stuff. So I have two spans. Both of them have a class applied. Now a class we can use in multiple spots. So let's go back over to my style sheet. Instead of making this an ID, that's a hashtag, we use a dot to specify this is a class called important stuff. So IDs, you can give them a name and you can specify some formatting. A class, you can give it a name and specify some formatting. The difference between an ID and a class is we can reuse a class as many times as we want, but we can only use an ID on our page one. Okay, so down here now, I refresh this. This important stuff has the class red and bold with red and bold applied. This important stuff down here has a class with red and bold applied. They both are the class important stuff. We can reuse that class as many times as we want. We can put it around all of our important stuff. My ID about section, I can only use once. So IDs, use once, hashtag for the CSS. Classes use many times with a dot to specify the formatting for the class. They both have their place, and we'll see some of that coming up.